the Sky News Centre. This is Paul Murray Live.
G'day, good evening. Welcome to Queensland tonight, where we are yet again on the Gold Coast. This is my favourite place in Australia, in my favourite state. I couldn't be happier to be here and be here right now. What a show we have for you tonight. Pauline Hanson is in amongst it in central Queensland. We'll get to her in a second, plus a few of my favourite journos and commentators from around the country, including the delightful and wonderful Anna Cordwell. Thank God you have HDTV for all of that tonight. Also worth mentioning, I'll tell you about this in detail later, Channel 2 has a new kids show. The kids show? Well, it's all about a transgender kid, of course, because if the one thing your kids need to learn about when they're watching television is transgenderism, and you're paying for it. Let's get to what matters tonight. There was a survey, because we don't say polls anymore on this program, a survey released today that pretty much sums up in a nutshell how most of us feel about what it's like to tell the truth, what it's like to speak your mind, what it's like to be unafraid in 2019, where the woke warriors are always trying to tear down those who they disagree with, or more importantly, those who will call them out for the BS that they serve up all day, every day. The Essential Poll released this information today, and it suggests that 64% of Australians nowadays believe that people are unlikely to say what they think as they are afraid of how others will react. Not on this show. Not on this show, not on this side of the TV, not on that side of the TV. We are all about telling the truth, telling the truly uncomfortable truths, confronting those who choose to undermine the traditions that have made this country what it is today, those who seek to sweep away the sacrifices of generations past, to somehow try and turn every single inch of this country into a giant university campus full of safe spaces and sook zones wherever the eye can see. Well, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen on our watch. It's certainly not going to happen on this government's watch. However, the woke is always just around the corner. This week is NAIDOC week, and I, like everyone else, support the idea, and particularly the NAIDOC Awards that happened on the weekend that are about celebrating Indigenous achievement. But as you know, the pester power of the woke brigade is now demanding that we effectively have a third chamber in the federal parliament, one that is exclusively for Indigenous Australia, made up of Indigenous Australians elected by Indigenous Australians. It's one of the central parts of the Uluru Statement that was released a couple of years ago. But of course, as worthy and important as bodies that can tell us nice stories and give us good speeches, the truth is that the best thing you can do to serve your community, regardless of whether you are Indigenous, non-Indigenous, an immigrant, or somebody who was born here and has known nothing but this place, stand for Parliament. Stand in the upper house, stand in the lower house. Don't just take the cheap seats of being able to point at a problem rather than getting your hands dirty and getting involved in fixing a problem. But because the diversity officers, you know, the ones who are all about diversity when it comes to skin colour, gender, sexuality, but not of opinion, because these people have ignored the federal election, because these people, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, their full-time job and their full-time hobby on Twitter is to search for symbolism. Well, they have hit up major sporting codes, and they now want footballers to get behind the cause of a third parliament in Australia. A third chamber that, by the way, will not pass any laws. Instead, will be a place where people can give speeches, and the government can, from time to time, double-check what the impact of legislation might be on Indigenous communities. This is garbage. Now, I understand the role and important things that Rugby League and the AFL does for Indigenous communities, but this was rubbish today. Have a look.
We represent the Rugby League community.
From the grassroots
to the elite.
Collectively, we unite, excite and inspire communities all across Australia.
Together, we make this response to the Uluru Statement from the heart.
We walk together in a movement.
Of all Australian people for a better future.
We recognise the Uluru Statement from the heart
as an historic mandate to create a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood.
We support the call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution.
And for a referendum to amend the Constitution accordingly.
How completely unnecessary for a sporting code to get involved in something as complicated as this. Something that would divide based on Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians about who gets a special voice in our system. You heard it there, a nation's voice. Now, this is an easy thing for people to argue for because it costs them nothing. But the harsh and absolute truth is that despite the fact that tens of billions of dollars are spent in this area every single year, there are kids being born with things like syphilis. There are thousands of kids being abused right now in the Northern Territory. In the far north of Queensland, there are Indigenous communities where things are killing people that in any other part of the country, if you went to the doctor after a couple of very quick courses of very easy drugs, you would survive. What you are seeing on full display here is how the diversity officers that have invaded every single company in the country, who turn around and say to their bosses, hey, this is the next thing we're going to use our PESTA power for. Now, I supported same-sex marriage and did so for 10 years, but I don't support changing the Constitution to elevate any one part of Australia above anywhere else. Just as Ken Wyatt and Linda Burney show us from both major sides of politics. You stand for a parliament, you get elected, and eventually you can get to cabinet. And yes, one day there hopefully will be an Indigenous Australian who is the Prime Minister. But the idea of setting up an entire new version of Parliament just to give speeches and interviews to Channel 2, it does nothing to actually close the gap, apart from those who, of course, are the professional agitators, like the diversity officers. Symbolism, check. And then we move on to the next thing. Ridiculous. Is there about to be another wrecking ball that will go through our parliament and knock out dozens and dozens of politicians under Section 44? Well, such is the claim being made by a collection of lawyers in the University of Western Australia. They released this information to Channel 7 tonight, that there could well be a whole new reason why a collection of people who don't even know they're dual citizens might have to quit the parliament. I'll let Tim Lester explain in his exclusive report.
The High Court has never considered this situation.
Section 44 disqualifies even those entitled to the rights or privileges of a foreign power. Co-author Lorraine Finlay says British law gives many Commonwealth citizens a so-called right of abode in the UK.
It's effectively citizenship in everything but name.
So how many in the new Parliament hold this ticking right of abode? Well, the report's authors have drawn up a list. 26.
Now, apparently they were able to draw up a list as well of some 25-something MPs. Again, Tim Lester with who those people may be.
A cabinet minister, the PM's own assistant minister, Nationals MPs make up 8 on the government side, among 14 from Labor, the previous leader and shadow treasurer and the past national president. The paper finds some of those disqualified last time could be disqualified again. It also finds 2 former Prime Ministers may have served in breach of Section 44.
So there's also this list that we've been able to work out after what Channel 7 reported this evening. These are the apparent MPs that are going to potentially fall foul of this. Can I just say up front, this is just rubbish. And if law professors want to come up with potential theoretical areas, OK, fine. They're searching for a headline. They're getting one. They're getting my attention right now. But as the Australian people showed, at every single one of the by-elections that were caused as a result of Section 44, were absolutely hair-thin technical breaches meant that there were by-elections every single time, no matter where it was. In Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, WA and Tasmania, every single time the people sent back the people who were affected or the political party that they represented. So good luck going on a fishing expedition to create drama in a parliament that has a majority of 1. But I think the lesson that has been well and truly learnt out of Section 44 is not that it's okay for people to be on the wrong side of the law, but when Australians are asked, did this person dud you at the last election? The answer, resoundingly, every time is no. Get on with it. May this story simply come and go in a day. But there will be plenty who will try to push it. The fact that there are more problems on the Labor side of things could be one of the reasons why this may disappear sooner rather than later, unless, of course, the Greens want to get involved. And we know they probably will. And just finally, Channel 2 tonight, well done to the 7:30 report. They had a shocking report into the federal government agency that is supposed to be keeping an eye on any sort of complaint that is made against a doctor. Now, the case that they highlighted was particularly complicated. It involved a potential assault. There were complications because that person went to the police, and then police referred them back to this body, and this body then turned around and said, well, because the police are involved, we can't do anything. But this matters, because this is the very body that is supposed to decide whether the doctor who is treating you is someone who is good enough, up to professional standards of treating you. Have a listen to what one of the investigators, who now doesn't work for that organisation, said about how impossible their task is when it comes to investigating complaints against GPs.
There were times when some investigators would have 100 files, and to put that at kind of to give an idea of what that should be, we aimed to try and have investigators at the front end have no more than 50, and investigators doing complex investigations have no more than 30. So when they've got 100, they can't do their job.
Dear God. We will chase this tomorrow with the Health Minister, but after watching that report, and I'm not going to pull a Malcolm Turnbull here, where just you see one thing on Channel 2 and then you demand a Royal Commission, what I do demand is an answer. We'll try and give you one in 24 hours about how the group that is supposed to make sure the doctors aren't dodgy isn't up to the task. We'll get back to you in a day's time on that, but again, well done to Channel 2, a rare moment of praise from I. Let's get straight to a wonderful panel here this evening. Michael Danby is the former Labor MP who joins us from Melbourne, one of the great reporters of the Daily Telegraph, their state political reporter, and I was pleased to say we got to hang out in Canberra last week, the delightful Anna Cordwell, and hello, my love. And joining us now from Queensland is none other than the Senator from Queensland, representing One Nation, its party leader. Where are you tonight, Pauline Hanson?
I'm at Marlborough. Marlborough is about an hour and a half north of Brockhampton, so it's a small country town, and these people have been destroyed because of the buying up by the land for the Singaporean military training. So I'm here supporting the town, one of the little towns throughout Australia, not only Queensland, who are doing it tough. So I'm here to support them.
God love you, darling. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. I will ask you up front, though, what did you think of this survey today that says, 64% of people believe that people are unlikely to say what they really think because they're afraid about how others will react. You know this, but there are plenty of people who sometimes get called quiet Australians, but those of us that have a voice will fire up and fire up hard.
Remember my billboard throughout the election, Paul? I've got the guts to say what you're thinking. People say to me, how true is that? So it doesn't surprise me at all. People need to find their voice. They need to stand up for what they truly believe in and forget about those people who want to put them down. Have your say, regardless of what it is. Have your say as long as it doesn't cause violence or hurt other people. Have your say.
Now, Anna Caldwell, this survey was done in and around to try to work out what people's thoughts were about religious freedom. There were a few other things that were in the poll, as people will be able to see on the screen now. But the one that jumped out at me was that idea that, 64% of people at least willing to tell these survey people, and we all know that these surveys always undervalue those that are willing to tell the truth. The number's probably higher than that.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think what this survey shows us is what a complicated issue this is. I mean, the Israel Folau case, as you say, really served to crystallise that, I think, for so many people in Australia. It really kind of brought so many people into this debate who perhaps hadn't paid that much attention to it before. And what we're seeing going on in Canberra at the moment as Christian Porter, goes through this process of briefing MPs, having workshops with MPs, that is a really important process because this issue really does have the potential to divide. And, Scott Morrison doesn't want that to happen. He's going to work very hard to bring people in so that everybody's on the same page. But it is such a complicated issue, and I think that's shown in that survey.
Well, again, where simultaneously people apparently say they're afraid, Michael Danby, to say what they truly think, but then conversely believe that people shouldn't be able to hide behind their religion as a reason to offend people.
Well, I think we're losing our Australian sense of humour, Paul. I'm going with a group of people to see Barry Humphries in his revenge show in October for those people who've tried to deplatform him. I mean, what kind of a world is it that we live in that sort of Australia's leading humorist is sort of deplatformed because he's politically unacceptable because of his views on transgender issues? I mean, let's be kind to all kinds of minorities. Let's keep our sense of humour and let's keep debating all kinds of issues. I disagree with Pauline Hanson on so many things, but I'm here tonight because I don't believe that she should be deplatformed. I think we should debate with each other. Pauline and I were happy to go toe to toe, and that's how it should be. That's Australia.
Yep. G'day, mate.
Bloody
How are
oath.
you?
Bloody oath, exactly as it should be. Now, a perfect example of how this works, about when people feel they can't say what they think because others will judge them, is what's happened today with the NRL. Now, there was this statement from the heart, and just as it was with same-sex marriage, there is this pester power factor that starts to kick in, when essentially the diversity officer goes to the chief executive of the company, the organisation or the football code, and then turns around and eventually they all have to get into the same, get in behind the same woke cause. Now, I'm sorry, but I do not support the idea of another talkfest, a standing talkfest body, one that was based off race. It is a bizarre situation. When you look around the Senate, when you look around the cabinet table, there are Indigenous figures that are there. There should be an Indigenous Australian at one point who becomes Prime Minister. But I'll give you the tip. It's going to be very difficult for that to happen if you're the kid born with certain diseases in South Australia, if you are dying of diseases in North Queensland, or you're being abused in the Northern Territory. None of those three things are dealt with by a standing talkfest, an opportunity for everyone to sit in the absolute modernity that happened because of history 250 years ago, rather, while simultaneously pretending that that history shouldn't have happened. Once again, the NRL and their little corporate PR video pretending, and this is the game you see, is that they say all the fans, all the teams, all the players, all the administrators, we're all on board. Well, I'm sorry, I'm a footy fan. They did no survey, and this is how the left works. They say everyone's on board, and then when you say you're not, you're the one with the problem when they try to speak in your name. Roll the tape.
We represent the rugby league community.
From the grassroots
to the elite.
Collectively, we unite, excite and inspire communities all across Australia.
Together, we make this response to the Uluru Statement from the heart.
We walk together in a movement.
Of all Australian people for a better future.
We recognise the Uluru Statement from the heart
as an historic mandate to create a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood.
We support the call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution.
And for a referendum to amend the Constitution accordingly.
Now, Anna, we can all have our view, and I'm happy to hear yours about whether or not this third chamber of parliament is a good idea. But what frustrates me is how this game works, where they turn around and they come out and say, everyone who likes and is involved with rugby league, we're all in, 100% in, and if you're not 100% on board, then somehow you're part of the problem. That's pester power. I know it well because I've got a toddler.
Look, I think, Paul, we are absolutely seeing this culture of corporate activism around this issue. It is very much the issue that's in vogue at the moment. You know, we've seen it with the NRL today. We've seen it with kind of mining types, financial types. I think, am I correct? Did Woolworths come out as well? You know, there has been this series of kind of corporate movements around it. And, you know, my view is that I don't think corporates are best placed to tell us what Indigenous people want. I think Indigenous people are best placed to tell us what they want and what they need. But I think more broadly, there are a series of events occurring that kind of make some movement in this space, some sort of conversion of what people are asking for, likely to happen. You know, I think the corporates getting on board. I think the fact that you've kind of got both sides of Parliament saying they want to talk about the issue, and I think potentially a Liberal government is probably the strongest to deliver some sort of action. What that looks like, I'm not sure, but I think we are seeing a series of indicators that this is the issue that's in vogue and that there is going to be more movement in this space.
Well, interesting, and see, Anna always on top of it. Yeah, just double-check the Woolworths Group. They reaffirmed their commitment to reconciliation, a statement that they put out yesterday. I don't quite understand how a shopping group has something to do with that, but anyway, this is how it works, isn't it, Pauline? Where in order to make it look like something becomes a fait accompli, the model was established with same-sex marriage, of which I support. But that was far more organic than what's happening here. The idea of changing the Constitution and elevating a standing body to have equal awareness as Parliament, but actually be powerless. They won't pass a bill, they won't pass a law. Instead, it'll be people who will sit there and give lovely, lovely speeches, but it does nothing for the kids that are being hurt right now.
You are so right, Paul, and I totally disagree with what they're aiming to do to give the Indigenous people a voice on the floor of Parliament. As you said, we have people that are elected who are Indigenous to the Parliament and are doing the job, and they're in ministerial positions. I don't believe in tokenism. I've actually, Peter Beattie, make up your mind, Peter. You had a go at politics. In Queens, a lot of people criticised you because you destroyed a lot of businesses here. You either choose whether you're going to run the NRL or you are actually going to get back into politics, stop sitting on the fence and pushing your own agenda, as what Joyce did with the same-sex marriage issue. The whole fact is that I actually went up to Bamaga and saw the Bamaga Council plus the Thursday Island Councils, and I've met up with these people. And when I put to them about the census, now let me tell you this, the census of 1971 was around about 115,000 Indigenous people in Australia. By 2011, the last census, it was 649,000. So all people are getting on there and ticking the box to claim Aboriginality. When I told them there's no definition to Aboriginality, their jaws dropped. This was the councillors, the mayor and the deputy mayor from Bamaga. Their jaws dropped when I said there's no definition to Aboriginality. So they've been pushing for this, and the whole fact is they, in the preamble, they want to actually acknowledge in a referendum that the Indigenous people are the traditional owners of the land. I want people out there, you vote for this, then be prepared if we ever become a republic that we lose crown sovereignty of our land, that we have acknowledged they are the traditional owners of the land. Will we lose our freehold land to our land? Will it be determined in the High Courts? There is problems with this. I'm sick of the tokenism. I'm sick of hearing it. And I said to these mayors and councillor, I said, I'm Indigenous. I was born here. This is my land. We will be treated equally. We will work towards all the problems and issues. But I said, I'm sick and tired of being classed as a second-grade citizen in my own country.
Well, help me out here, Michael Danby. What are we missing? Because you automatically know how this will be cast, right? Hard-hearted bastards on Sky News couldn't care less about Indigenous affairs. Not true. I have spent so much time on this program, and we've lost viewers doing it, talking about the reality of what exists and why we need to get on top of it and why tokenism doesn't fix anything.
Well, Paul, there's already a third chamber in the Parliament called the Federation Chamber, so us whiteys have a chance to sort of talk on issues that we can't pass any legislation on as well. I'm not saying there should be a fourth chamber, but certainly the history of Australia is that no consultative organisation will get support unless it's supported by all sides of politics. Even a minority, say the right of the Liberal Party or One Nation opposing it, would make the passage of a referendum very difficult. And lastly, on the point of corporate responsibility and corporate activism, sometimes these kind of things can go too far, and I think they may have been going too far in the case of the Folau case, because if it's proven that some of the corporate sponsors of the NRL twisted their arm to take this further, that might be a secondary boycott and might be illegal. So the huge amount of money that Israel Folau has collected, particularly from the quite outraged Pacific Islanders who support rugby league in Queensland and New South Wales, Qantas and co might find themselves in big trouble.
But I think what's frustrating as well about this, Anna, is that, again, completely ignoring what just happened at the last election, about how you convince people, about how you make people come with you on a journey, rather than just saying, fait accompli, it's done, if you oppose it, you're part of the problem. On top of that, exactly what Michael just said, in another code, there's this Folau issue playing out, and we're having a discussion about changing the laws about religious freedom. The whole point is, the commercial competitor to your paper and that, of course, being the Channel 9 papers, they just assumed that the woke revolution was happening. So this was all just in train for Shorten to become Prime Minister. After Shorten became Prime Minister, this would be his version of sorry. This would be the first out of the gate big symbolic win. Well, it didn't matter what happened at the election. On the ideas board over there at the Herald, they had a wraparound, multiple pages. This was cause du jour. And we're just rolling on as if it didn't matter what happened a month and a bit ago.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it would be a huge mistake for the left to demonise different voices in this debate. I think that only hurts kind of everybody involved. I mean, it is true, Scott Morrison has set aside $7 million in the federal budget to look at this issue. So the conversation is happening, it's on the table, and the best thing that can happen is for is to find a way to bring all Australians together on this issue. It doesn't help anyone to have a divisive debate, and whether the corporates make that worse, I'm not sure. Potentially they do, I think, but ultimately, I think Scott Morrison is very aware of the fact that if this is going to happen, it needs to be this kind of, he needs to speak to the quiet Australians, he needs to get everybody on board, and he's put the money aside to look at it, and I think we go through that process.
Well, again, till then, I'm not going to be lectured to and have my finger waved at by companies whose diversity officers are, basically on top of their CEOs, rather than this being a genuinely organic conversation. But, dare you push back? This is the whole thing. You push people too hard, you're not going to get the general thing that you want. As I've said, for those that are half paying attention, I support a Mabo Day. Get rid of all the other stuff. Let's not focus on the past. Let's focus on achievement and celebrate that going forward. Let's celebrate it by using the man who used white man law to prove black people counted. That's what mattered for me. But anyway, we wait and see what happens. But any resistance, you'll instantly be pushed to the curb. Good luck with that when it comes to normal people in the next little while. I mentioned before how Channel 2 have got a new kids show. Well, according to one of the TV websites today, production has begun on a brand new show. It's a kids show that has, well, a transgender character at the heart of it. You're paying for this, everyone. Enjoy. The series stars two people, a 12-year-old transgender girl navigating her first terms of high school. She not only has to navigate the challenges that come with starting school, but also find the courage to live as her most authentic self. Coming to a station called ABC Me. It's the one up from ABC Kids, and you're paying for it. Enjoy. And after the break, is there any way you would watch this movie? I know I wouldn't, but I need to tell you what is coming, probably to a lefty cinema near you. It's all about the sooky tale of the Greens trying to win a lower house seat, and they couldn't get there. I'll play you a bit in a sec. Thank you very much for watching. We have got Pauline Hanson, who is right in the middle of Queensland right now. Michael Danby is right in the middle of Melbourne, and right in the middle of the HMAS Free Speech, that giant desk. All by herself is Anna Corbell from the Daily Telegraph. You all right, Anna? Is it all good there? You're enjoying the free space?
I'm holding the fort. It's okay.
Good. I'm pleased to see. Pleased to see. All right. Now, Pauline, let's get into this. Why are you in this town? You were talking about how the government's been screwing them. What's been happening?
All right. The Turnbull government brought in about the Singaporeans buying up land, good prime agricultural land from around Charters Towers, plus also around Rockhampton. Now, that was compulsory buying up. It would have affected about 53 to 60 farming families. They were going to go ahead with it. I actually took the map and I spoke to Turnbull about it, how it would destroy these communities, and also about it would take 100,000 head of cattle out of the community and actually destroy the abattoirs and jobs. He listened to what I had to say, and the next day he made it non-compulsory. But from this area, 17 farming families actually sold their land. So now the Singaporeans, and you've got the training by Americans and by other countries out here training at the moment. And so it's really affected this community. So you've got a really small town, they've got a garage, they've got a post office, they've got a museum, but it's bypassed. So I've actually written to the Minister this week to actually, hey, help the town out. You've helped to destroy it. Put some signs up, encourage tourists and people coming by to actually call into town and give them some support. And that's why I'm here. I'm supporting this small country town.
Well, good on you, darling. That's why we love you. That's why we love you being there. I'm serious. I don't know a politician in Australia who covers as many Ks as Pauline Hanson does, and she does for those very, very reasons. If you want more info about that or any other stories tonight, jump onto our Facebook page. Go searching for Paul Murray Live. So, just before, again, we get back to the cut and thrust of politics that's around here today, can I show you, what do you think is the greatest scientific achievement of the 20th century? Just have a little think amongst yourselves, have a little chat. I will give you what a poll suggests that may be the case in a second. But back to the politics here, where the man who is about to become Labor's next General Secretary, well, he's a little bit like Albo. He's a bit of a fan of old mate Jeremy Corbyn. Now, this, of course, would be no problem if Jeremy Corbyn was a normal Labor leader, but he is, of course, such a crazy, hard-left, lunatic leader of the Labor Party in the UK that half of his shadow cabinet have quit in the past. They've tried to get him thrown out as leader. Basically, the MPs don't want to work with him, but because the paid up and proud membership of the Labor Party is kookier than kooky over there, he stays. If this bloke ever got in charge, he would ruin the UK. No question about it. But the man set to become, according to The Australian, the next Labor National Secretary, as an avowed past supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, describing him as a leader within the mainstream post-war social democracy. Michael Danby, goodness me.
Well, newsflash, Paul, Jeremy Corbyn's, I think, on the precipice of being pushed out. His two deputies have said that the Rasputin who works in his office, Seamus Milne, has to go. And when your two chief deputies, two chief lefties in the UK Labor Party start fighting Corbyn, the ice pick cometh. So that's one point. Second, look, a lot of this pushback against Paul Erickson, who is a very effective operator in the Labor Party, comes from those people in Sussex Street who think all geniuses come out of New South Wales. Erickson was the person who defeated the Greens in Batman. So any bloke who can do that, in my view, is a good person. And I think, like a lot of people, he made those statements about Corbyn in 2017. You'd come to realise that Corbyn has become a disaster with his indecisiveness over Brexit and his inability to fight the scourge of anti-Semitism in the UK Labor Party.
Well, Albo was having photos with Jeremy Corbyn in March of this year, 2019. It makes people nervous if that's the captain and then the coach is a bloke who out-lefted the left to hold on to Batman. Jed Carney basically ran as a Green.
Well, I'm sorry, Paul. I think the Green political party is one of the worst scourges in Australian politics, and I think the fact that people on the left of the Labor Party can lead the fight against them is a good thing, and that Paul Erickson has shown himself as an effective political operator. I'm sure Albo and Erickson will see that with this official inquiry that the Racial Discrimination Commission in the UK, and listen to this, Pauline, is investigating the UK Labor Party, and with the BBC documentary that won't be shown on the ABC unless Sky gives it incredible publicity about anti-Semitism in the British Labor Party, well, when Albo and Erickson catch up with that, they'll drop Corbyn like a hotcake.
Well, let's see if it stays there. Let's see if it stays there. But, of course, we all know the hit jobs that Channel 2 want to do, and they're not going to do them on Labor. We all know what they did to One Nation in the lead-up to the election, but it didn't hurt. The second senator elected in Queensland, vote up all over the country. Anna, are you hearing exactly what Michael Danby is saying here, where there's sort of... the Sydney types are trying to fight against the Melbourne types for control of the party and control at the organisational level. What have you heard about this bloke who is currently acting National Secretary, basically the person who would run the campaign at the next federal election, and about whether this bloke's up to it or not?
Well, Paul, you and I have talked about my views about Sussex Street quite a bit, and I agree with Michael Danby. Sussex Street, the facts are, it's not just my views, the facts are Sussex Street does not have the runs on the board over the last couple of years to be kind of calling the shots. spots. In terms of Erickson, I mean, he has his work cut out for him. That is the absolute truth, no matter which way you cut it. I mean, Labor is essentially has found itself almost in no man's land at a federal level, certainly at a New South Wales level as well. And, you know, like we all take inspiration from different places. So perhaps he can take some inspiration from Corbyn, but you're right, if it goes down that class warfare path, we know that the huge lurch to the left didn't work. So, you know, as I say, he has his work cut out for him and it won't be an easy job.
All right, Pauline, do you reckon the future for the Labor Party is to go further to the left, to follow the Corbyn path?
No, I don't. They'll be absolutely destroyed. If you have a look what's happened around the world, that a lot of people are actually going to the centre-right of politics and voting people in parties in of the centre-right. This guy, he's what, in his late 20s or 30s, if that. So he's virtually come out of university economics and he's now is guiding the Labor Party. So, you know, what has he done in life to actually understand politics and life in itself? So haven't helped the Labor Party if they actually really listen to him carefully, because if you look what's happening in Britain with Brexit and wanting to get out of it, and of course the people spoke against the immigration and that's why they wanted to Brexit from the European Union. So the Labor Party has got a lot to learn. They've been pushing about the class warfare. They really don't get it. They don't understand what's happening out there with the workers of this nation and those struggling pensioners and the independent retirees. And the Labor Party has really hitched themselves to the bandwagon of corporations and big business. They've forgotten about the grassroots, hard-working Australians that need a helping hand.
But Paul,
by the way, yeah, you go for it,
if Pauline's against youth like Erickson having a shot, what about Ashby in her own show? She's got younger people who are giving her advice too. So, as Kevin Rudd would say, fair shake of the sauce bottle.
I think Ashby's got about 10 years plus on him. So anyway, you're talking about the National Director of the Labor Party. So Ashby doesn't have any title like that whatsoever. But what I'm saying is
he allowed back in Parliament House yet?
You bombed.
Yes.
Yes, he is. No, that was all political. We all know that was a political stitch-up. But anyway, we know that the
God,
Labor
Pauline,
Party
they love talking about James, don't they?
Election. Yes, they do. So anyway, he's a great staffer, and
means he must be good at his job.
Everyone's listening. Plus the Labor and the Liberal Party and the National Party, James is not going anywhere.
But Paul and Pauline, I want to say, Paul and Pauline, I want to say how ashamed I am that the UK Labor Party has an official investigation against it by the Anti-Discrimination Commission in Britain. What a shame it is that a great political party would be so brought so low that they would have something like this happen. It's only happened in Britain with the British National Party, but it shows you, Pauline, that sometimes these official bodies can work against people on the other side of politics if they're discriminatory as well.
All right, I want to move on here. One more thing about the UK just to mention as I move on here. Jeremy Corbyn, in fact, has just announced in the UK that he believes that there should be a second referendum and his Labor Party would vote to remain in the EU. So fantastic. See how lefties, what they'll do, they'll turn around and if they don't get the referendum result they want, they drag it out for 3 years, they cause all the trouble, and then they say it's time to reverse it. Keep that up, Jeremy, because you'll be helping out Boris to a brand new, fresh, multi-year term in the UK. What a dickhead, seriously. All right, let's talk about this mining committee in Queensland. Pauline, can you believe that part of the system that is supposed to keep miners safe, and many haven't, half a dozen have died in Queensland in the past little while, that this didn't meet the standards and it didn't meet. It had to be disbanded. Why? Because there weren't enough Sheilas on it. The government is really offering very little as pushback here. I'll have a chat to Deb Fricklington in a few minutes' time for what the opposition might do here. And when we tried to contact Palaszczuk's office today, they basically screamed down the phone and hung up on us.
Paul, I think it's absolutely Ridiculous that here we've allowed it go down this path of gender equality, so you have to have a certain number of women on the board, and of course in women there's not a lot of people with that experience, and of course they have to have experience from the mining industry to be on the board. How bloody ridiculous this whole thing has got, this gender equality BS, and this is why in my party I do not have gender equality system, no gender equality numbers. You either can cut it or you can't cut it. If you don't meet the requirements that I think you should have to be a member of parliament or work in my staff or in my offices, you won't get a job. I don't look at it and see whether you're a male or female, transgender, whatever, the LGBTQ plus all these letters of the alphabet. I think it's gone absolutely over the top and ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's this thing, Anna, where I don't think the state government in Queensland has been serious enough at all in response to all of this, basically putting no one in front of a microphone, no one in front of a camera, and hoping, as long as they can get to Wednesday, then everyone starts to talk about Origin. If Queensland wins on Thursday, then they won't have to talk about it then. Well, I'm here to tell them we'll be here on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all of next week, all of the week after that, and we'll be here for years after that. So they're not going to be able to outrun this one.
The thing is, there's really only one position you can take on this issue. I don't know how someone doesn't lose their job over it. It is an absolute... The idea that this is kind of a gender equality scenario is extraordinary. It's an embarrassment for feminism. I want more women on board. Of course I do. I want more women in top positions based on merit, all of that. But at the end of the day, a safety committee has to meet regardless of whether there are women around the table or not. I cannot believe this is a yarn. If this story fell into my lap, I'd be thinking I had the yarn of the century, because it is completely absurd. And I think the state government kind of needs to front up with a better answer.
No, I agree, or an answer, but they
Paul,
just think they can slow play the ball, push through here.
Paul, don't unions have their place? I bet you Michael O'Connor from the CFM-MEU is pretty unhappy about this. They were pretty unhappy during the last federal election with the attitude of the Queensland government on Adani, and I bet you he and the union are as mad as hell about their members dying as a result of this committee not meeting. And the Queensland government, which is meant to be aligned with the socialist left, I mean, hopeless. I mean, how could you do something like this and people die? I bet you if Sky got O'Connor on the blower, he'd give them a blast.
All right, well, don't worry. We'll pick up the phone. Super producing team will be onto that for tomorrow night's show here on Sky News. See, I always we can plan the show on the air. I'm more than happy with this. All right, last one here before we take a break, and I want you to, again, think about the great scientific achievement of the 20th century. There is a survey out, and I'll tell you what other people think, but what did you think it was? Is it Wi-Fi, bionic ears, all sorts of medical things? What do you think it might be? I'll tell you what the survey says in a second here. But would you watch this movie? Resounding answer, no. But get ready, because it's coming to a turtleneck film festival near you. The Candidate, which premieres at the Melbourne International Documentary Festival this month, follows Green's hopeful in the final stages of an ill-fated tilt at the inner North Melbourne electorate of Batman. Even if they gave you free tickets, Michael, even if they gave you a dark pair of glasses and a beret to hide up the back of one of those cinemas there, would you even think about watching this film?
Oh, I'd love any infighting amongst the Green Party. I mean, I'd probably take the front row with a whole group of people. But seriously, this film started off apparently as a highly sympathetic thing to this Green candidate, was going to go with her all the way to Canberra to her first speech. But it reveals a degree of infighting in the Melbourne Greens that I think is of national interest, because it's in the national interest that their influence not spread right across Australia. And this is a typical sort of far-left organisation. They accuse each other of heresies, and as soon as they get the sniff of power. So I think I would go. And remember, after all, there was that fascinating film made about the two factions in the Sydney Council that became a national bestseller. I'm not saying this one will, but, you know, things can turn out to be different. Rats in the ranks, exactly. So this is like a Greens version of Rats in the Ranks.
Yeah, well, I don't know, what do we call Green... Anyway, we'll tell it... Yeah, well, if you've got an idea for what this doco should be called, jump onto the Facebook page. That we can free think on all of that. Pauline, if they gave you free tickets, let's try and get on the poster with, like, an anti-review.
No, not interested. Couldn't even drag me there. Paul, I've been living this for the last 23 years of my life, so why would I go and watch someone else's experience in politics running for it? I can drag up all the footage that all these television stations and everyone's been doing about me and go and watch my own movie. You know, one day, listen, there was talk, hey, Michael, you might want to come to mine. There was talk about doing a movie on me or a series on me. Would you come and watch mine?
Well, I'd go to all. I'd go to the Liberal one, I'd go to the Labor one, I'd go to your one, I'd go to the Green one. As long as everyone's fighting each other and it's entertaining.
You must lead a very boring life then, Michael. I tell you what,
I love
podcasts must have been very boring
even
for
docos,
you.
even about you.
Anna Caldwell, will you be my +1 if we got an invite to this?
I'm
I'll
your
put you on a plane.
+1.
We'll go to
Look,
Melbourne.
I'm going. I'm with Michael. I'm in the front row. Grab the popcorn. The Greens, when they get going, guys, the Greens are more vicious than anyone else combined. This would be like the Titanic. Basically, the ship's going down. There's class warfare. Hopefully no nudity, but it would be an absolute blockbuster. They are so vicious. If you're not going to see this movie, I think you're missing out, Pauline.
All right, cool. Well, we'll all see you there in the front row.
That way, I totally agree with you.
Thank you.
Now she's in. Now she's in. All right, quick break, back with more. Plenty to talk about, including the greatest scientific achievement of the 20th century. Look at each other across the lounge room. What do they think it is? We'll tell you what others think next. Thank you very much for watching wherever you happen to be. I'm in Queensland. Pauline Hanson is as well in Victoria, right in the middle of Melbourne. What's the weather like right now for you, Michael Danby? Freezing as obvious or a little bit warmer than usual?
Well, the good thing is I walked in from the tram along South Bank. It wasn't raining, so I'm happy.
Oh, good boy. All right, Anna Caldwell, what's it like in Sydney tonight?
Divine, as usual.
Oh, look at you. Well, I tell you, the sunset on the Gold Coast, if you want to have a look on my Instagram page, look, I can't take as good a photo as Anna or Pauline or Michael. If you just want to look at a fat bloke smoking a cigar looking at one of the great sunsets, PM Off Air is where you can find me on Instagram. PM Off Air. No politics there. It's just fun photos of, you know, motor racing, smoking, and mostly Queensland. I love it in every way, shape, or form. We're about to say goodbye to everyone watching us on Win, so I'll take this opportunity to say thank you very much for watching, wherever you happen to be. And I meant to say this a bit earlier in the show, and I never take enough time to say this to you, but I know that there's a billion other things you can do every single night. The fact that so many of you all over the country make an appointment to sit and watch us at the same time every single night means the world to me. We've been here for a while, we'll be here for a whole lot longer, but I will never take for granted the choice that you make each and every night, and I will never take for granted the idea of what we're fighting for. We fight, we fight, we fight. If we lose direction, give me a clip around the ear. Send me an email, pmurray@skynews.com.au. Let's continue now with Anna, Michael and with Pauline Hanson. So, the greatest scientific achievement of the 20th century. Again, according to Essential today, the discovery of penicillin was by far the most popular. The launch of the internet, the first person to walk on the moon. We're a couple of weeks away from the 50th anniversary. And I should give a shout out to the Brisbane Museum, who've got a fantastic display on this. My little girls loved that a couple of weeks ago. The first powered aircraft, the generation of electricity from nukes. Introduction of the contraceptive pill, rather specific reference, that'd be the big one, but anyway. The invention of television, cloning of the first animal, Dolly the sheep, and off to the South Pole. Let's start with you, Michael Danby. Do you agree with how that list ranks things, and do you put penicillin above all other?
I think the invention of all vaccines is pretty important, but I put Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, at the top of the list. I think that is the most profound changes to energy, power, to weapons, to it affects the future of all of us in the most profound kind of way. And Einstein was the genius of the last century, and his the power of his inventiveness, including an amazing final discovery of E equals mc squared, was proven here in South Australia by an observation centre in South Australia. That proved the theory of relativity.
Yeah, I reckon Man on the Moon's pretty massive, but I think you make a very good choice for the man with the weird hair. Anna, what stands out for you? Of course, I think you were only born about 5 minutes ago, but, you know, for those of you, can stretch your mind back.
If only, I would say. Look, I wish, if only, I wish that I had such an intellectual answer as my friend Michael there, but I'm not a scientific expert. I'm happy to get behind penicillin. Look, I think, medical inventions are pretty incredible. And number two, the World Wide Web, I think that has absolutely changed the way that we live our lives, It's changed almost everything about the world. So I don't mind the list.
Now, of course, just like Anna, Pauline, you were born 5 minutes ago, so all of these things you've just been taught about, you live none of it. What do you think about penicillin? Is that the number one?
I think all medical inventions, whether it be transplants, whether it be kidney, liver, heart transplants, look what they've done there. I think all these inventions with penicillin, tuberculosis, curing all that, my attitude to life is if you haven't got your health, you actually have nothing. So I think these inventions, medical reasons, is what's giving people better quality of life, and I think it's so important. That's what it's all about.
Agree completely. All right, before we finish up with you guys, and we'll have a chat to Deb Frecklington in a second in Brizzy about that mines inquiry and the fact that that committee got broken down because it didn't have enough Sheilas on it. Ridiculous. I mentioned this a couple of days ago where Albo looks like he's going to cost you about $2 billion. Why? Because Labor decided to buggerise around in the lower house, 4 hours of debating about the tax cuts and the name of the bill. Ultimately, 59 they vote for those tax cuts. There's still a bit wibble-wobble about whether they will actually deliver them in full, meaning there'll be a fight about tax at the next election. Good luck with that, Albo. It worked out so well for the last bloke. But because Albo buggerised around, they had to do the deal with Lambie. Part of that deal with Lambie was getting the housing debt for public housing forgiven for the Tasmanian government. Hasn't been locked in yet, but I would imagine that's the price of the deal, considering it was the most important thing that the government wanted done. Total amount of debt that exists in the state and territories for stuff like this is about $2 billion. We told you the states would be lining up. Well, here comes another territory. The Territory Treasurer has said that the federal government must invest in the Territory, particularly into projects that will create jobs. The federal government also needs to stick to its promise that no state or territory will be worse off under the GST. And, surprise, surprise, certain debts should be forgiven. Pauline, you didn't end up doing a deal when it came to the tax cuts, but what do you say about how the government ended up doing a deal because, effectively, Labor didn't back it until there was no other option?
Totally agree, Paul. Look, Lambie's got the best deal that she could for her state, and good luck to her. But the whole fact is, and I abstained from voting on this. I supported the first and second stage. I question how are we going to be economically in the country half a decade down the track to bring in the tax cuts. I think we're overtaxed in this country. I think it's ridiculous. But the fact is that it's cost us more now, and these deals were done. Morrison and Cormann were bloody minded about the whole lot. They never even came to actually talk to me about the tax cuts. They said, OK, you've made up your mind. They never even approached me to talk to me about the tax cuts at any stage.
Now, Anna, we must have been, our minds were in sync because I said that after the tax cuts, it was like Oprah Winfrey. You get a tax cut, you get a tax cut, you get a tax cut. You wrote exactly the same thing, and I know you filed before the show, so I apologise for copying you in my subconscious.
I was worried, as I texted you, I was worried that you must have said it to me before and I'd subconsciously ripped you off, but I'm totally happy to be on the same wavelength, and I think it probably was an Oprah Winfrey tax moment, and that's for the benefit of the country.
Yeah, what do you think about the cost of the deal that's done? And again, the only reason it's there is because of Albo's buggerising around. Now, Dee Madigan was quite definite on Sunday, saying, how can I blame Albo for a deal the federal government does? Well, of course, they only had to go searching for the deal because of what Labor was doing. That was my point.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And I agree with Pauline Hanson that, Jackie Lambie got in there. She did a good deal for her state, and that's her job. That's what she needed to do. But, of course, the other states are going to fall in line. On the one hand, putting the debt to one side, this idea, as we saw in that statement, this idea of states pushing the feds for more investment in infrastructure, pushing them for projects that will drive jobs and will drive the economy, I think the states should be doing that. But then when it comes to the idea of wiping debt, I think it does get a little bit more complicated, and I agree with you to some extent that absolutely is on Anthony Albanese's shoulders.
All right, Michael, you're outside of the parliament now. What do you think of the way Labor played everything? They voted for it in the end, but they wanted to effectively oppose it right up until they had no further excuse to.
We'd be mugs if at the next election there was any debate about us supporting the tax cuts. I 100% support Joel Fitzgibbon and Peter Khalil, who've raised these issues. I think it's interesting today that I thought you'd be congratulating me on Labor dropping the negative gearing and the tax on franking credits. So
bravo, sir.
Let's go. Let's have a level playing field from here. It's going to be a very difficult job for Albo to contest the next election against a very strong government. It looks at this stage, but taxes are not the area that we should be fighting on. I just say pass it and let it go through. It's just not something the Australian people support us on. I mean, a lot of people do think that we're grossly overtaxed. I mean, again, I don't want to suggest to all of your studio guests, but Bill Kelty seemed to have a fairly radical view on this that was on the front page of The Australian. That's not a left-wing newspaper.
No, last time I checked, not the case at all. All right, I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, Pauline, what's next stop on the trip?
Heading up to Townsville, so I'll go up there and call in Townsville and back to Brisbane, and who knows where I'm going to be next week, Paul. I'm all over the countryside, so it's great to actually get here. And anyone that's passing, if you're near Rockhampton, call into Marlborough, call into the little town, come and say hi. The cafe, call and see Sue, say hi. Pauline said to come and see you, and you'll get a great meal there. So support the small town, the local town. And hi, Max, I know you're out there in Rockhampton. You're tuned in tonight. Paul, you have got so many supporters out there all the time on the road. People are saying they tune in Paul Murray. You're doing a fantastic job bringing, these issues to the Australian people, and they're so pleased to see that you get around the country yourself.
God love you, Pauline. Thank you very much. If I could have enough blood transfusions to become a Queenslander, I would. In the meantime, I just surround myself with people like yourself and Queenslander Anna Caupel. Anything in the paper you can tell us about tomorrow?
I don't want to give too much away. I think you can catch it on the front page tonight.
Ah, look at you. I was buttering you up there thinking you might give us a little peek at something. No, well done. Michael Danby, thank you too, mate. All right, that's where we leave it now. In a second, we'll talk to Deb Frecklington in Brisbane. She is the leader of the LNP. Here, she is red hot about this mine story and about how gender was more important than miners' safety. But also, straight after the break, an injury that happened at a medieval festival. I know someone got hurt, but I can't help but laugh. And I think you will too. The details next here on Paul Murray Live, right across the country and around the world. You might be watching us right now in London, at an airport lounge particularly. If so, g'day.